Dream broke, but it's clear now. No handouts, had to get down. Now what they fear now. No money millionaire, we here now. Got scars, but I wear that crown. Turn pain to a real account. No money, no excuses, no limits.
Welcome back to the No Money Millionaire Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Webb, your No Money Millionaire. And this show is about building wealth and creativity, not cash, and breaking out of the old system that tells you the only path forward is trading your life for a paycheck. Today's guest fits this mission perfectly. He walked away from corporate life at 43, not because he hit the lottery, but because he built a plan that actually worked. He's an early retiree, financial independent educator. He's the author of the award-winning, best-selling book, Escape the Clock, and host of Escape the Clock podcast. He teaches something most people desperately need, a practical, data-driven path to financial freedom. Not theory, not motivation posters, actually framework people can implement. Daniel Rodgers is here with me today. Daniel, appreciate you being here.
Thank you, David. So happy to be here with you talking about this today.
Yeah, thank you. So, I like to give every guest their own opportunity to introduce themselves and tell people, who you are in your words.
Yeah, I guess I was definitely a no money person because I started with no money, as all of us do, and really just stumbling and tripping through life, trying to figure out how to get ahead. And I, like you mentioned in the opening, I'm very data driven. And as I got myself organized and educated, I really started to figure out through tracking what worked and what didn't work. And I really figured those skills out and I honed them and mastered them in my job, which was great because I got to work. Eventually, I got to shift to program management. And as being a project manager and a program manager for some of the biggest companies in the world, they pay really reasonable money to get people to come in and do that, because without it, 66% of projects are more likely to succeed when you have a project manager, because there is a skill to this. There's a skill to taking something complex that we want to accomplish and knowing how to break it down and feel like we always can look at every setback as a bump, but we're still motivated instead of something that is a catastrophe. And we just say, okay, I guess I failed. It's about always getting ahead. And I did that with my own financial independence. It was a goal I had early on as I was getting organized, going from no money to eventually being a multimillionaire just by being able to use every instrument I could figure out what to use and using data to know, was it working or was it not working? And when I ended up retiring, I decided to put that into a book because people were asking me, hey, you teach this stuff. Can you teach me? And I realized a book is probably the best way to have anybody do that, because I'm only one person. I can only scale so far. But like you said, I'm doing it through a podcast. I'm doing it through teaching, volunteer teaching in my state. And I also do one-on-one consultations online. I'm trying to give back and help because it is such a gift to get your time back. It's such a finite thing. And it's something that the job and the system will take your time from you and, for a paycheck. And a lot of people end up on autopilot, kind of enslaved to that system. And I wanted to break free of that. And now I'm trying to help others do the same.
So did you, was it a moment that clicked, or was it kind of a slow build that led you away from, because you were killing it in big tech.
Yeah.
But you realized you're climbing at some point you realized you were climbing the wrong wall.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Yeah.
And then, so was it just a clicking moment, or did it build toward Escape the Clock system?
The program was a slow build. I started just like most of us do, in a spreadsheet, right? I was trying to figure out, because I got a degree. It was the first in my family to get a college education. I had this degree, but that came with a lot of debt because there was no savings. There was no plan for that. So I'm like dealing with this $100,000 of school debt, my wife going to graduate school. So trying to pay that tuition, help her through, new family, new home, smaller than I expected paycheck. So cash flow was an issue. And I realized through tracking, I was just never going to get ahead ever. Like I was barely denting the debt. Costs, inflation, costs will go up. It was feeling really scary to me. And it was a little bit of a shock back then. This was more than 20 years ago now. And I really started to educate myself at that time. I wanted to understand, how does this mortgage system work? How does real estate work? How does investing work? How does savings work? All retirement accounts, everything. So it took me a while to self-educate, but as I was doing it, it did develop into this, what I would call a program. And it wasn't until I became a program manager that I realized, oh my gosh, I just didn't have names for these things. That was a milestone. This is a project. That's a task. This is just a large thing that's organizing me towards a goal. And there's a beauty with having it in a program shape, because when I go and talk to a financial advisor, or if I sit down with my spouse or a friend or whatever it is, that kind of visual, that view of a program, anyone can get it instantly. They can just see it. They're like, oh, okay, well, you're tracking your net worth. You're seeing how far you are. You have a number to your goal. You have this broken down list of to-dos, and you can see how far you are on the to-dos. Like, it creates conversations and collaboration, unlike what I think I see a lot of people are kind of in this blinders autopilot mode. Not everyone, but a lot of people, they don't know how much they're spending. They don't know how much they're trying to save. They don't know how much they're going to need. These are all answerable questions. And with that comes clarity and control. And that can feel a lot more comfortable.
Sure. I heard you say that most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because their plan is flawed. So what breaks most financial plans, and how does your program style, approach fix that?
In program management, it's not just like, can you build a program? It's how do you run the program?
Okay.
And to be a program manager, you're really a risk manager. So you're constantly trying to think ahead about, how do I disambiguate this? Where's the uncertainty? Where could it go wrong? What would I do if it were to go wrong? What's my contingency? If the whole plan would have failed, do I have a plan B? It's always about, how do you stay on your feet? How do you get back up? How do you keep moving forward? And that sets you apart. There was like a Fidelity study in 2024 that said that it was over 60% of people are more likely. 60% of people don't have plans at all and have no idea how much they need. And you're more likely to see, just by writing it down just one time, even if you kind of throw it away, the act of creating the plan will set you apart. And it's a very healthy exercise, because you start introspecting. What do I want? What do I need? What am I doing? Where am I? What am I trying to get to? And what that does is it creates this risk management mindset where you start thinking, well, what if this goes wrong? That's not a bad thing to do at all, because if something were to go wrong, what we do is we have a dual mind system. We have two brains. We have our emotional brain. We have our logical brain.
Sure.
When we plan, we're tapping into our logical brain. When we don't plan, what we do is we allow our emotional brain to kick in, or our lizard brain, if you want to call it that. And when that happens, what we do is we're reacting to something. And generally, that's where regrets and things come out of what happens when we reflect back. Right. So thinking ahead, you can do it through pre-mortems or even post-mortems, or you can do it through just general, if-else contingency kind of planning, whatever you want to do. Just by thinking ahead, what you're doing is you're giving yourself the advantage of staying in your rational mindset and always thinking, okay, this is not the end. This is not defeat. This is just a minor setback toward my larger goal. How can I learn from it and do even better next time?
Nice. Do you see, are there any common assumptions that ruin like long-term planning?
That's a really interesting question. I was asked me that before. Long-term assumptions. I think it would be that life's not going to change. I think because once you make a plan, it's stale, like instantly. It's constantly fluid. If you think you know exactly where you're going to be in even 5 years, you're wrong. Life is going to surprise you. So I think that's where I would see problems. I would see these. I'd be working in my corporate world, and we'd make these big plans. We'd lock people in rooms for days, making these plans, and they're very expensive. That's a lot of money to lock all these people in a room for days. Right. Sometimes offsite, you'd ship people away to come make these plans, and you come out with this presentation and all these artifacts, and you review them with executives, and all you're looking for is this rubber stamp Like, is this good enough? And you compromise, you make concessions, you take the feedback, you get the rubber stamp and you celebrate it. Yay, we have the plan. Let's go. And then the next day you find out why that plan is wrong. Because the first moment you start working on it, you realize the reality of the situation. Yeah. And then you're making the real plan, the plan you can never know until you start doing. And that's not me saying don't do it and just do and figure it out. I'm saying by doing it, you set a path at least. And as you go through that path and, you'll adjust to the, ebbs and flows of life, you can make those little adjustments. And what you're doing is you might be way off the target for a while, but you start to kind of hone in until you get more precise. And as you flow through life and your life needs start to settle, like less life events, like when you're in your 20s, constant life events, right? Boom, 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 always something happening. It slows a little bit in your 30s, slows a lot more in your 40s. And then, can get to a point where you're like, I know myself, I know my needs, I know my limitations. Now, all you're doing is honing in on that target. You're letting your plan take its final form, and you're feeling really good about the progress you made along the way. But if you're never adjusting it and you're thinking you figured it out and you're rigid with it, then it's just not going to work. Yeah.
No, it usually doesn't end up the way that you think it's going to be. If you can't adapt and adjust and be able to, stick to the course, but be able to adjust along the course, it's not going to end up what you thought it's going to be.
Well, I know you know that. Like, as you're going through and working on your deals, like, you have to figure out, like, what is a new need? What is the supply issue? What is whatever the day is? Like, it's some firefighting, right? Like, you're gotta adjust. And the better you get at predicting what might go wrong, the easier and less stressful the event will be. Right. And even if you don't, you have to give yourself grace. Like, we're going to miss stuff, and that's okay.
Of course.
As long as you just remind yourself why you're doing it in the first place, stay excited about it, and keep going.
Well, that's when, because most of my properties, I always look for value add. Mm-hmm. And, you try to prepare a budget for what you're going to do, but, there's always stuff that that you had no idea you're going to find. Always. Sometimes it's like the most, you scratch your head like, I can't believe this is really like this. You wouldn't even anticipated that a house would have been built or had something. And it's just, wasn't prepared for that. That's for sure. But, you have to make allowance that you're going to have those in your path.
Yeah. We bought a property just this year, and it was great idea. My son went to college. We had saved up enough for him to be in the dorms for a couple years. Okay. Then I wanted to have a property that he could use for his last couple years, where he could have a roommate. We'd still have some rental income coming in, and I'd rent it until he's ready. So this year and next year, I'd be renting it. Found a property near the campus, lots of student population, good growth, lots of demand. So that shouldn't be too hard to rent. The property had been in the market for quite a while, like over a year. And so I knew they were starting to feel a little antsy about it. So I was able to offer less cash, bought it out in cash, and they accepted it, no back and forth. So felt really good about it, but I really needed the seller's disclosure because I was trying to vet this thing, make sure it could do what I wanted. Cause I knew I wanted 2 renters and I knew I wanted to make some improvements to it because they had new flooring and some newer appliances. So I was like, okay, they had done some work already. Anyways, long story short, we could not get that seller's disclosure. Like they kept asking, they would not give it to us. Yeah. I was like, well, I got to get this thing on the market before the students find all their homes. So I need to get this thing through. So I ended up go ahead and closing on it. I got the seller's disclosure literally 24 hours before closing. Wow. I went through it. It looked completely fine. Felt good about it. Anyways, long story short, I got people in there. It's rented, everything like that. But then I find out through the HOA that there had been a fire in the unit. Oh. And that's why they replaced so much of the flooring and stuff like that. Yeah. But because of the fire, I'm not allowed to make some of the upgrades I want to make, such as adding air conditioning and some other. Oh. So an important detail that was not disclosed. So my plan is already having to be modified because I'm not going to be able to, I wouldn't say flip it, but improve it to a way where I could get my target rental income that I was looking to get out of that investment. Now it's still going to serve the primary focus though, which is my son will have some housing. Right. It is some reasonable rental income. It's just not exactly the way we had planned for it, but I kind of thought through enough of it and looked at enough of the details. It's probably okay.
Well, hopefully the market shifts the direction you need by the time you're ready to do something with it.
Yeah, and you never know. I could make it up in a different way, other than what I planned.
Exactly. So, can you explain what is the work optional blueprint? What does that realistically mean?
I think it means educating yourself to know that what cash flow you have, you're using it in a way to make sure that your money is doing its work for you so that you can have enough money built up through compounding and things like that, that you don't have to work when you don't want to work. It's not about retirement. Retirement is kind of a terrible word. It's kind of about being put out to pasture and being done forever. That's not really what it's about. It's about financial freedom, because the system is really designed in a way to force us to have to borrow money, even when we shouldn't be borrowing money, and putting us into debt and trying to make us chase status and stuck being forced to take a paycheck. Well, that's not great when you're in a layoff scenario or a forced retirement, or you just hate your job all of a sudden, new manager, something simple could happen. You never know what it is. So having that option is empowering. It takes a weight off your shoulders, even if you are working. So it's about understanding that with the income you have, you can make moves, especially given some time, to get to a point where you have enough. And it's about defining what enough is, and then using the right strategies to get there.
Investorfy, the #1 lending source for first-time and early-stage investors. Just learned how to find your first deal? Let's get it funded. Investorfy, the only No Money Millionaire certified lender. Find us at Investorfy Lending or visit our website at investorfylending.com. Investorfy, turning new investors into trained professionals. What are you waiting for? Schedule your free review today.
So if there's people who feel overwhelmed or behind right now, can you offer a couple, like the first couple steps that they could do to actually start moving them in the right direction?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple really easy things you can do right now. And some of these are not as fun as other things, but they will help you get a better sense of what you're dealing with, because they can promise you every situation is improvable, 100% every single thing. Even people that are doing really, really well that's listening to this, there are optimizations, I promise, somewhere. You can always do a little better. The first thing is just you have to go and look at your spending, because there's two things you really have control over. It's your the income you have, because you can make moves to increase your human capital, meaning your skills, what you can do to make money. And that doesn't have to just be your primary active income through work. There's other passive income and other options you can do to widen that funnel. But there's your spending, because you have so much coming in, and then there's your decisions on what you do with what's left over after deductions, taxes, and things like that. Once you start understanding that you can make sure that you're taking advantage of higher interest savings accounts instead of standard, what I should be predatorily outlawed, which is the normal savings interest rates, which are wrong. That's an easy move. Every single person I meet, the first thing we do is we check what's your credit card interest rates, what is your savings interest rates. Credit cards always have an optimization. You can always move off of the highest ones, move the balance. Now, sometimes that can hurt your credit score, so work with somebody on that one. Don't just start moving your money around. But you can always optimize your borrowing situation and then your saving situation, because the idea is when you start making some cash flow moves, you start to free up a little bit more delta there so that you can start doing bigger things. In particular, investing, because with investing, smart investing, meaning if it's stock market, look for low cost options. This is why I do not ever want anyone to go into mutual funds. and there's going to be some other finance people who hate this, but mutual funds have a higher cost to them. There's a reason you're pushed towards them. Stay away from lifetime insurance policies.
Okay.
Those almost always have too much cost buried in them. You know, you could do much better with other investment vehicles without coupling it to insurance, for instance. I'm very generalizing here. There's always nuance, of course. But generally what I'm getting at is once you understand how people make their money and what the cost is with these things, you're even more educated to make sure you're getting a total return, meaning that when you start to think about inflation and other things that eating into your overall costs, you're maximizing the possible return that you can get. And so when you start finding so a lot of people like low cost index funds, that's completely fine, like an ETF or something, broad market, that's absolutely fine for someone who wants to be hands off. Other people who wants to be a little bit more educated are going to find other equity options with higher returns, but maybe a little more risk. So what I'm getting at is once you start building up a comfortable buffer with the money you have left because you've made good moves with your spending and your income, now you have what I call a risk capacity, which means a capacity to take a little bit more of a chance on something with a higher return. And that will really speed you up to compounding towards a very significant amount of wealth. And when you get there, then it's more about how do you protect it.
So it sounds like at that point, I heard you mention before that where you get to the point where work becomes a choice, then would you call that what the freedom number?
Yeah, your FI number. Yeah.
Okay. So explain that a little bit. What is it? And, why does it matter?
Yeah, it's different for everyone. So, I mean, I guess at just level set, let's just start with net worth for a moment. A net worth is your assets minus your liabilities. You could total up this number. Anyone can do this. Do this when you do financial consulting all the time. You look at all of those costs that you have in your life, all those liabilities, including even potentially future costs. Like, if you're going to put dependent through school, you're going to pay for college, stuff like that.
Sure.
And then all those, your home, any rentals you have, your savings account, investments, even retirement accounts, all those assets. This gives you at least a general sense of your net worth, and increasing that is the most simplest way to think about this. Maybe you need to get your net worth to 3 million. And by that point, maybe you'll have enough money to survive. But my approach is a little bit more pragmatic than that. There's this movement called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early. They have an FI number in there, which is based on saving enough money to be able to withdraw 4% from brokerage accounts until you have the right age to take out of retirement accounts. And then that has enough. Mine's closer to that model where you have to have a sense of a total worth in non-retirement accounts and a total worth in retirement accounts. But I'm not fixated on just stock market. It's anything that doesn't have a retirement account restriction to it. So real estate's absolutely a great way to go. It's actually probably the most proven way for people to hit these numbers, because you create both higher asset capital, even though it's illiquid a lot of the time, but you also create passive income. And passive income is so important in an earlier retirement or whatever you want to call it, because at some point you need that psychological safety of not having that paycheck. You want to feel like cash is still coming in and that you're not just taking money out all the time. Because when we take, we feel like we're losing, but when money's coming in, we feel like we're still getting ahead. And that can take a lot of stress and anxiety out of most of our lives. So knowing that you have enough money in your investment properties, it could be stock market, it could be real estate, it could be crypto, it could be whatever it is that you believe in for your personal profile and your program, but that creates enough cash flow to cover your cost of living so that you're not withdrawing so fast that you feel like you're struggling because inflation might go up or whatever. Right. And then you get to your retirement period and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah, that was one of my, when I really started getting serious about real estate, I first wanted to replace my W-2 with passive income. And then at that point, I was like, okay, so let's start gauging for my retirement. How many apartments, what I'm going to need, what's my number that I'm going to be able to retire at. And, let's get my so many rental income to come in to get that number. So I don't mess with any of the other investment instruments. I'm completely focused on, I didn't even do crypto. I did it one time. I lost it. I bought the wrong coin. It's what they call a rug pull, I guess. I was part of that. And I didn't get into it. They say, just like, I don't know, I guess just like gambling or whatever, don't gamble with something that you're not okay to lose. Yeah. And so I did. I just put, a little bit of money on it, and it was like, and it did. It just was horrible. So that was my one event with crypto. So I just strictly focus on real estate, building up my rentals to know this is what I need to retire.
I think that's great. I mean, you're basically doing it. I know you're very much a project manager, even if you might not give yourself the title.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing you're doing it that way, to be honest. I think a lot of financial advisors would say you're doing it wrong because you're not diversifying properly. Personally, diversification is really just a technique to try to bring down standard deviation, meaning that we can hedge on both the upside and the downside. So what I'm getting at is the reason that we do diversification is if we have some investment asset class moving down, we hopefully have another one that can stick or move up to offset that. It's a protection mechanism. I know your expertise, though, is real estate. Exactly. So personally, I think you should focus on your expertise and diversify within your expertise where possible. So not always the same housing unit type, not always the same market. There's diversification can happen in lots of ways, which I think is something a lot of financial folks miss. They think, oh, okay, well, for you'd have to go, stock market. They wouldn't say crypto. People are too speculative, but they'd probably push you hard into selling some units to put something into maybe a stock market or somewhere else. But I would say savings, having a liquid backup option, it can be really critical. So a lot of people say, have like 3 months worth of your cost of living in a savings account. I think that's fine. Personally, I have a couple years worth because I want to be able to not have to feel forced to sell a property or to sell a stock investment because I know I have buffer there, and it's a high yield savings account. So I make, over almost $1,500 a month just in my high yield savings account as passive income because of the amount there. Now, there's some tricky stuff there with FDIC insurance and stuff. And so putting it in one place can be tricky. You could do the same thing with CD ladders where you can have like rolling interest and stuff. But the point is, like, there's other ways that you can stick in real estate and still not get in the stock market to provide yourself protection on the other side.
Yeah, I'm pretty, diversified in what I own. I have some commercial, I have multifamilies, single families, duplexes, apartment buildings. It's all over the place, so I don't have one particular. I look at the deal. If the deal looks like it's going to make sense to me, I can add value, I have a lot of upside, then, I'm usually in. So
that's great. Yeah, I remember reading your book. I was like, wow, there's a lot of possible property types when I was going through the book.
Yeah. Well, thank you. When people talk about, now you said you retired early. What was the year? 43 you were able to retire?
43. My goal is 45. Yeah, I did 45.
Okay. So when people think about early retirement, they think, beaches and, and, margaritas and, or pina coladas. And, what surprised you once you actually left the workforce?
How much my family and friends make fun of me for not doing that stuff, probably.
Okay.
I got first I focused on health. Health was my first one. I felt my job was really getting tough towards the end. The tech industry has been really hard on a lot of people. I ended up as a manager absorbing a lot of extra hours and projects. And I did end up in a hospital at one point, and I had a medical leave, and I had to try to get my health back in line and went back to work, even though the doctor said, don't do it. It's a bad idea. And I said, no, I'm going to create boundaries. It's going to be fine. And I completely failed at that. Like, I was luckily, I didn't need to go take more disability or anything like that because I had done I was at my FI number that I was working towards. So it got to a point where I had a conversation with my wife and we were on our 20th wedding anniversary, and she just kind of said, "What are you doing? Like you hit your goal, yet you're telling me you're going to work for another couple months? Like, why?" I'm like, "Well, they need me, blah, blah, blah." We make up these stories in our head. The
They
truth
always
is,
need us.
yeah, they like it's, and they'll tell you that, like, it dawned on me. The only time I was really being told how important I was or being offered more compensation was when I was going to a new job or leaving a job.
Sure.
Never really in between. So it's kind of interesting. Like, and when I said I'm leaving, it was like, okay, what do we have to do to make you stay? I'm like, whoa, that would have been really great if you would have said that before the layoff started, right? Like, there's many things you could have done to help me then. But anyways, to answer your question, I focused on health, got that back in shape. Then I really wanted to focus on relationships. Like, we put work ahead of so much, and I wanted to reconnect with like family and friends and spend time with my son before he went to college, and just be there for my daughter more. And I did all those things. That's been wonderful. I think relationships is probably one of the best types of wealth that we have outside of health. Our health is probably the top, and then relationships would be second. Money is really a means to an end. I find that type of wealth is a stress when you don't have it. But when you have it, it's just not really the thing that's making you happy necessarily, but your time can. So I invest my time in my family and my friends, my sport. I play billiards competitively, which is a blast. Working house projects, like looking at the next investment I might do. I started podcasting. I wrote a book.
I understand.
You just get busy.
Yeah. You mentioned your wife and relationships, and money causes a lot of problems sometimes in relationships. Yeah. And so how do couples build a financial plan, a shared financial plan, without fighting over, every decision, or how do they handle, when there's differences in what they feel?
Such an important question. And I think it's one that if you start the relationship with honest conversations about this, it can go way better than putting it off. Because I've definitely worked with people who was surprised later when it became a problem, how difficult it was to have these conversations with their significant other. I think first it starts from a place of positivity and empathy and trust and not blame, because you could be very different than your significant other. And that doesn't make them wrong, especially when you take the time to understand why their behaviors are the way they are. So there's a fantastic book about money scripts, which is basically this idea. It was written by Dr. Brad Klontz, who's a financial and behavioral psychologist. He was talking about this idea of we are basically based on our values are based on our environment, how we were raised as children. So when we were taught directly by our parents and the system around us, or it happened implicitly. We just observe things without realizing it, and it influences who we become. So if you watch your parents struggle and with money, you will likely have a scarcity mindset as an adult. You will worry about having enough, or even when you do have money, you're worried that it might go away. Others who kind of grow up with this idea of never have to worry about it, we always have money, might end up in an abundance mindset where they're a little reckless with it, and they need to be a little more careful. And then some people might actually even rebel from their script at some point. They might go, I never had money. Now I want to feel like I can have money, and I might spend a little bit more graciously. Personally, when I did this exercise for myself, I learned that I did have a scarcity mindset because I grew up in a very poor family. I was doing these smart things. I was getting ahead, but I'd never spent money on myself ever. I'd spend money on everyone else, never on myself. And it was to the point where I'd drive a beat up car. Like I was driving like this, like 80 Mercury Sable until literally the thing and I was driving this to Microsoft. I was working at Microsoft at the time. I had the worst car in the parking lot. I drive it in. The thing eventually died. and I'm like next to like $250,000 cars, right? Like it's nuts. And I had to go and call and find a place that would take it as a donation. And they went and they towed it out for me. Like that was the kind of mindset I was in. Cause I was like, oh, I'm never going to have enough money. It's going to go away. There's a problem with it. And then even when I did, and I knew it, and I had all these people telling me it was enough, I still couldn't spend money on myself. Like I had to like go and figure out why that was. And then I had to create little hacks. Like, okay, I'm going to give myself a spending budget. And I can spend anything in that. And until I felt like, okay, you know what? It's okay. You're fine. So the money scripts are important. And when you have a conversation with your significant other, start with the childhood. Like, hey, what was money like in your house growing up? How did your parents act? How did what happened? And then how did your behaviors form when you were a young adult and later? Try to understand the origin story a little bit before jumping into, hey, you spend too much money, or hey, why don't you enjoy what you saved? Like, try to understand people. We have these scripts. They're not good or bad. They're just there, and we can change them if we want to, but you can't change someone else's. Right. You can understand someone else's. You can have a constructive conversation, but eventually the plan when you're in a family is the family plan. Like you can have your own individual retirement account, but if you are responsible for dependents and a significant other, even if you manage that money separately, you have a direct influence on what they're doing and how they're spending and how they're behaving. So these conversations are so important, and building a program, even if it's just for yourself to start with, you can bring your significant other and review it with them. Talk about, hey, this is what it was like growing up, but look, this is my plan now. And I bet you they'll have ideas. They'll contribute. They'll maybe want to build their plan in yours, or you can evolve it together. It can be a very healthy and positive activity when you approach it with the right mindset.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense taking it back to, the core differences, we're so just geared to accepting on surface, the surface level, but like my family, the first beginning, my parents kept any money really like we didn't ever hear about any of that. But my mother tells me my father, if he wanted something, he bought what he wanted. He worked. My mother didn't have to work, and if he wanted something, he bought what he wanted. But then when he left, and my mother was just with my brother and I, she had to get on welfare to try to figure out how to make it, and so now all of a sudden I'm having to take food stamps, and we're going to the church pantry to get food from the church. And so I think I have a shared mindset. I think I have from my father when he just wanted to buy whatever he wanted, but then from experiencing the welfare and going to food pantries and stuff to get food, I just knew I wanted money. And I just knew I didn't want to ever face that, or my children face that. I just knew I wanted money. So I think I have a dual system going on there. So.
And it sounds like it was a defining part of your character and your journey.
Oh, it put me on it. Yeah. The whole food stamps and the pantry, that I was like, I got to change that. And so, I moved out early. So maybe that was also a push. I moved out at 16 and, started on my own. And I went to high school and when I had absences and I had to give a note from the school, to the school for me being absent, I told them, I said, I live on my own. I don't know what you want me to do. Oh, and they're like, well, do you have a utility bill? And at that time I did. I was like, yeah, here's my utility bill. They said, all right, well, we accept that, you live on your own. So if I was absent, I would just have to write my note. I was absent. I was ill that day, and just give my note. So I started early, but my path was really driven and, trying to figure out how to get, where I am today. And it was a lot of ups and downs along the way, a lot of mistakes, trial and error. And so, but.
Do you have kids?
I have one.
Okay.
And, I don't know how he turned out the way he did. And, he's done great. He's went on, and he was a first generation college student. Nice. And matter of fact, he in both sides, his mother's side and his father's side, he was a first generation high school graduate. And he's went on, got his master's degree. He's looking to go to UC Davis for his doctorate, and he's been doing really well. So
I mean, you provided the security to allow him to do that. So, I mean, I think a lot of that informative years of your life, I think you were trying to make sure he didn't have to go through that kind of struggle. So that's amazing. It's part of what those struggles do. They define us, and we try to do better and break that mold. And it doesn't mean that everyone has to go through hell to get into a good situation. I think it comes down to dreaming about where you want to be, not having to have life kick you in the butt to force you to go there. Right. You can just know, I want to be in this place. You don't have to have that same story. You could just, start working towards that. And I think that's what's so powerful about it.
So if there's somebody that's listening right now and they're ready to stop living on autopilot, what's the one mindset shift that they need, and the one practical step that they could take this week or start today? What would you advise?
The first thing to break autopilot is to take the blinders off. You can't. Autopilot's based on rails, right? They call it the tunneling effect. It's where you're kind of just trying to survive and go forward, and so you don't always stop and pay attention to what's happening around you. You have to stop for a moment. It's okay. You don't have to run the next mile. It's okay to stop and take a moment to assess where you are and where you're trying to go, instead of just running as hard as possible. To do that, it really does take a little work, though. You have to go and pull and look at your credit card statements. You have to look at your bank statement. And even if it's just glancing through it, look at the interest rate, look at the spending. I promise you, just browsing it will create an idea in your mind about where you've been on autopilot. It could be anything from a subscription that you didn't even know you had, to a price hike that you didn't realize had happened, or just the amount of spending that you're totaled across. You just look at your spending from month to month. How is it changing? Is it going up? Is it spiking? What's happening? Like these little things, what it's doing is it's helping you like assess where you are, and look at your savings account rate. Are you getting one of those under 1% savings account? Because there's a super easy way to start making money. Move to a higher yield savings account. You might have to shop around a little bit to find one that has a minimum balance that works for where you are, but I bet you can find one. Sure. Now you're making real money. As long as you beat inflation, you're getting a positive return. Anything that all those normal savings around, you're losing money. You're actually getting less than inflation. Right. You're actually losing money. Yeah. Look at your retirement account. Is it growing? Are you investing it? I've talked to people who have retirement accounts that don't invest them. It's sitting in cash. That means you're actually getting no growth. You're just sitting in a reserve. That's not going to set you up in the future. So it's just about these little stimuli to kind of wake us up a little bit to our situation. And then when you're ready, I have a free smart sheet on my site. It's been downloaded over 1,000 times. If you don't want to start with a blank canvas, go use that, because what you can do is you can plug your numbers in, and you can see how things change. And you can start to understand your mortgage pay downs. You can start to understand your debt reductions, how much you need to pay towards a credit card. You can start to see, hey, if inflation were at this number, how would it look in 5 years? You can see inflation. I have a way for you to plug a single number in. You can see it across a 30, 50-year horizon. So you can start to get an idea about where you are today and what the future might look like. And that will inspire you to start to take bigger and more significant actions. And you might find, wow, actually, I have some room. I can afford to make an investment. And I say that carefully, because a lot of people probably listen to this can afford to make investments, no problem. Sure. But there are people who can't yet afford to make an investment. It's not safe yet. You need to get your debt situation and your savings situation fixed first. Once that's done, now you can start to think about investing. So there's a little bit of an order of operation here, but I would say you got to get the blinders off so that you can get out of autopilot, so you can start to make real progress. And by doing it the way like my spreadsheet does it, or the way my book talks about it, it's data driven. There's no guessing. You know if it's working or not. You can see the needle move. And that's what I recommend. It doesn't have to be my spreadsheet, or you don't have to follow my book. Just take the action to try to figure out where you stand and where you're trying to get, and then find some way to measure it, and you'll be absolutely fine.
So you just mentioned your spreadsheet and your book. So for anyone listening today, where can they go to find those, to find more, from you? Where can they go?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so you can find the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, everywhere. But to make it easy, I put everything on a website. So if you go to escapetheclock.com, it's all one word, escape the clock. There's the book is listed there. It just won the American Writing Award for Best Personal Finance and Investing Book, won the Pencraft Award for Best Retirement Book. So it's done pretty well. I tried to make it into a comprehensive guide that's not just yet another boring finance book. It takes the best from all the stuff I learned and all the books I read, and it teaches you how to make your actual plan, because that's a personal thing. Your plan is different than mine. So you could get the book if you're interested, but I also have a podcast. I release it weekly. I'm talking about the same ideas. I'm bringing experts like David came on. We talked about the idea of getting into real estate when you don't have the capital. Amazing ideas using like OPM, things like that. There's a lot of strategies. And it's not like I'm saying every strategy is for everyone. You go figure out what works in your plan based on your risk level, your goals. You might not need a 529 account because you might not have dependents, or that might be very significant for you. You might have multiple dependents. You're worried about putting through college. I've had experts on the podcast talk about that. I talk about that strategy in the book as well. So I have the smart sheet there. Go to escapetheclock.com/planner. I have a free weekly newsletter where I give tips out. And I also have free one-on-one consultation. So you can sign up at the site, completely free, no upsell. It's just a way for me to help people get started. And that's my goal. I'm using this time to give these ideas back and help as many people reclaim their time as they can.
Daniel, that was great. Thank you. So for everyone listening, go get his free weekly newsletter, all the other stuff you just heard him tell you about at escapetheclock.com. It's the best way you can tap into all of his frameworks, all of his free tools. So Daniel, it was great seeing you again, and I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Always love speaking with you. Thanks for having me on, Dave.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
No money millionaire, we here now. Got scars, but I wear that crown. Turn pain to a real account. No money, no excuses, no limits loud. I want a millionaire, we here now. Used to dream broke, but it's clear now.